Somewhere right now, a financially comfortable person is explaining to a broke 26-year-old that avocado toast destroyed their future. And somewhere else, that exact same lecture was given decades earlier about record players, disco records, and something called 8-track tapes. Every single generation in modern history has been told the exact same thing: you are terrible with money, unlike the generation before you. And every single time, it turns out the generation saying it was living through completely different economic conditions and just forgot. This is the Weller Records, where we take the lecture your uncle gives at every family dinner and actually check it against the numbers. If you are new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because today we are exposing history's longest-running financial insult. Tell us the worst money lecture you have personally received from an older relative. We are genuinely dying to read these in the comments. This conversation at the Wealth Records is going to make you feel a lot less crazy and a lot more annoyed at your extended family. Let's start with the obvious question nobody in these lectures ever seems willing to actually answer with real numbers attached. Bad with money compared to what exactly? Compared to which decade, which wage, which housing market, which interest rate? Because the moment you ask for specifics, the lecture usually turns into a vague mumble about work ethic and personal responsibility. Reason number one, and honestly the funniest one, is that every generation conveniently forgets the exact conditions it grew up inside. The silent generation was scolded by their parents for wasting money on newfangled things like refrigerators and washing machines. Yes, refrigerators, an appliance that now sits in literally every kitchen on earth, was once considered a frivolous, irresponsible splurge. Imagine your grandfather being told he was financially reckless for wanting food that did not spoil within 11 hours in the summer heat. Baby boomers were then scolded by their own parents for buying color televisions, a purchase considered dangerously indulgent at the time. A color television, an object that now costs less than a decent dinner for two, was once treated like a symbol of moral collapse. Then, Generation X got scolded for buying Walkmans, cordless phones, and eventually those enormous first-generation cell phones nobody could afford. Then Millennials got scolded for coffee, avocado toast, and streaming subscriptions. A lecture so famous, it basically became a meme itself. Now Gen Z gets scolded for exactly the same things, plus something new called doom spending, which is just spending, but with better branding. Notice the pattern. Every single generation gets accused of wasting money on the specific consumer products that simply did not exist before them. It is never actually about the spending. It is about the fact that older generations find new technology suspicious and slightly threatening. Reason number two is that the math conveniently disappears the second the lecture starts, because the math would completely ruin the lecture. In 1975, the median home price was roughly 2.5 times the median household income, a genuinely manageable ratio by any standard. In 2026, that ratio has climbed to roughly 7 times median household income, nearly tripling in exactly 50 years. So when someone tells a 28-year-old to simply save for a house the way they did, they are quietly asking for a different economy entirely. It is a bit like telling someone to win a marathon while forgetting to mention the finish line moved another 15 miles down the road. Reason number three is that these lectures almost always come from people who benefited from conditions they now insist did not matter at all. Someone who bought a starter home for the equivalent of 2 years of salary will happily tell you housing has always been about discipline. Ask them what their mortgage rate was, what their entry-level salary bought them, and watch the confidence in that lecture evaporate rapidly. It is the financial equivalent of winning a coin flip and then writing an entire self-help book about your incredible coin flipping technique. Reason number four, and this one is genuinely funny once you notice it, is that the lecture always assumes the previous generation invented saving. Every generation acts as though budgeting, frugality, and financial discipline were discovered fresh by them and then somehow forgotten by everyone after. Newsflash, humans have understood the concept of not spending all their money since approximately the invention of money itself as a concept. The idea that an entire generation collectively forgot basic arithmetic is not an economic theory. It is closer to a conspiracy theory about vibes. Reason number five is that inflation gets conveniently left out of these conversations, almost as if it is too embarrassing to mention out loud. $1 in 1970 had roughly the purchasing power of about $8 today, a detail that changes literally every single comparison being made. When Grandpa says he bought his first car for $2,000, that number sounds tiny until you realize it was actually a massive sum at the time. Comparing raw dollar amounts across decades without adjusting for inflation is like comparing shoe sizes without mentioning which one is a child's shoe. Reason number six is that housing, healthcare, childcare, and education have all outpaced general inflation dramatically, which nobody mentions either. It is not that prices simply went up a little, it is that specific essential categories exploded far beyond the pace of everything else combined. College tuition alone is increased at a rate that makes buying a house in the 1970s look like a modest weekend hobby purchase by comparison. So the lecture compares apples in one decade to some kind of gold-plated, artisanal, hand-carved apple in the next, and calls it a fair comparison. Reason number 7 is the quiet disappearance of pensions, job security, and the entire concept of staying at one company for 40 peaceful years. Previous generations built wealth slowly and steadily because their income was stable, predictable, and often came with a guaranteed retirement attached. Ask that same generation to build wealth today using freelance gigs, unpaid internships, and a retirement account that depends entirely on the stock market. Watch how quickly their confident advice about patience and discipline starts sounding a lot less confident once you remove their actual safety net. Reason number 8, and possibly the most annoying one, is that every generation loves blaming lifestyle choices instead of structural economics. It feels good to say someone is bad with money because it implies the problem is fixable with a little extra effort and a slightly better spreadsheet. It feels significantly worse to admit an entire economic system quietly shifted risk downward onto individuals who had absolutely no say in that decision. Blaming lattes is comforting. Blaming a 50-year housing affordability collapse requires admitting something much bigger and much less comfortable. Reason number 9 is that the financial media industry genuinely profits from convincing you that your problems are personal instead of structural. An article blaming your spending habits is short, cheap to produce, and endlessly repeatable across every single generation without much research. An article explaining wage, stagnation, housing supply shortages, and healthcare cost inflation requires actual research and rarely goes viral the same way. Simple blame is profitable content. Complicated structural analysis is a much harder sell, even though only one of those things is actually true. Reason number 10 is that this entire cycle repeats, because nobody wants to be the generation that admits the deal changed on their own watch. Admitting your children face a genuinely harder economic reality means admitting the world got worse under conditions your own generation helped shape. That is a deeply uncomfortable thing to admit at a family dinner. So instead, the conversation quietly shifts back to avocado toast and lattes again. It is much easier to imagine your children are simply making bad choices than to imagine the ladder you climbed got pulled up behind you. Let's actually walk through the specific, very silly examples throughout history, because this pattern is honestly funnier the further back you look. In the 1920s, some commentators genuinely worried that installment buying, paying for goods over time, would financially ruin an entire generation. That same installment buying eventually became the entire foundation of the modern credit system that funds houses, cars, and business loans today. In the 1950s, teenagers spending money on records and soda fountains were accused of frivolous spending that would doom their financial futures forever. Those same teenagers went on to become the generation credited with building enormous post-war wealth, somehow despite all those dangerous milkshakes. In the 1980s, video game arcades were blamed for draining young people's wallets one quarter at a time, an entire moral panic over pocket change. Meanwhile, the actual economic story of that decade involved deregulation, shifting manufacturing jobs, and rising income inequality, somehow less discussed. In the 2000s, cell phone bills were blamed for young adults struggling financially, right as the housing bubble quietly inflated in the background. Notice a pattern yet. The visible, small, easily mockable expense always gets blamed, while the enormous, invisible structural shift gets almost no attention. It is a bit like blaming a leaky faucet for your flooded basement while ignoring the broken dam sitting directly upstream from your entire house. Now let's talk about why this specific lecture, Bad with Money, works so incredibly well as a piece of intergenerational messaging across decades. It is short, it is punchy, and it fits perfectly into a single disapproving sentence delivered right before someone passes the mashed potatoes. Explaining stagnant real wages requires several minutes and a chart. Calling someone irresponsible requires exactly 4 words and a disappointed sigh. Short, emotionally satisfying explanations always spread faster than long, accurate ones, a pattern that shows up constantly throughout financial history. It also conveniently protects the self-image of whoever is delivering the lecture, because nobody enjoys admitting their success involved a lot of luck. Admitting luck played a role in your financial stability requires a level of humility that a lecture about discipline simply does not require at all. It feels much better to believe your success came entirely from your own brilliant choices rather than from buying a house before prices tripled. So the lecture survives generation after generation, not because it is accurate, but because it is flattering to whoever happens to be delivering it. Here's the part that should honestly make everyone a little bit angry once they actually sit with it for more than a few seconds. If every single generation has been called bad with money by the generation before it, then logically, either every generation is somehow uniquely bad. Or, and this is the far more likely explanation, the actual conditions kept changing while the lecture itself stayed suspiciously exactly the same. It is statistically almost impossible for 6 or 7 consecutive generations to all independently develop the exact same specific character flaw. What is far more statistically likely is that the lecture itself is simply a recycled script, updated only with whatever new gadget exists that decade. Swap out record players for avocado toast, swap out 8 tracks for streaming services, and the underlying accusation remains completely unchanged. Let's actually put a face on this, because abstract generational insults are much less fun than specific, ridiculous historical examples with names attached. Benjamin Franklin, a man literally printed on modern currency, once complained that younger colonists wasted too much money on imported tea and sugar. Sugar, an ingredient that now costs pennies per pound, was once considered a symbol of reckless colonial extravagance, destroying the next generation's future. If Benjamin Franklin thought sugar was going to ruin an entire generation, imagine what he would say about a $14 oat milk latte today. Fast forward to the Great Depression, where parents genuinely lectured their children about wasting precious nickels on something called moving pictures. Movies, an industry that eventually became one of the largest cultural exports in American history, were once treated as a moral hazard for young wallets. Fast forward again to the 1960s, where owning a personal record collection was treated by some older adults as evidence of dangerously misplaced priorities. Meanwhile, the actual economic story of that decade involved manufacturing wages that could genuinely support an entire family on one single income. Somehow, the records got blamed and the actual wage structure of the era got completely ignored. A pattern you should be noticing by now, repeatedly. Fast forward to the 1990s, and suddenly the villain became something called call waiting, an ad-on phone feature considered a luxury impulse purchase. Call waiting, a feature that cost a few extra dollars a month, was somehow treated as evidence of an entire generation losing its financial mind. Meanwhile, actual wages for entry-level workers were already beginning the slow, steady stagnation that economists are still measuring decades later. Every single decade has its own version of the sugar, the movie ticket, the record player, the call waiting feature, the avocado toast, the streaming service. And every single decade, the actual structural economic shift happening in the background gets almost no coverage compared to the silly consumer villain. It is honestly a little bit impressive in a horrifying way how consistently this exact same script gets recycled without anyone noticing the repetition. You would think, after roughly a century of the same joke, someone would eventually connect the dots and realize the joke was never actually about spending. But the joke keeps working, generation after generation, because each new generation experiences it as a fresh, personal, uniquely targeted insult. Nobody sits down and researches whether their grandparents received the exact same lecture about 8 tracks, because who actually researches insults? That lack of historical memory is precisely what allows the lecture to survive completely unchanged decade after decade without ever facing real scrutiny. Let's talk about the economics behind why this specific insult format works so well, because there is actually a fascinating psychological mechanism here. Humans are naturally drawn to explanations that assign clear individual blame rather than explanations involving diffuse, complicated, systemic forces. A story about laziness has a clear villain, a clear moral, and a clear solution. Work harder, save more, stop buying frivolous nonsense immediately. A story about housing supply shortages, wage stagnation, and healthcare inflation has no clear villain, no satisfying moral, and no quick, easy solution. Our brains are simply wired to prefer the first kind of story, even when the second kind of story happens to be the one that is actually true. This is not a flaw unique to any single generation. This is a universal human bias towards simple narratives over complicated, uncomfortable ones. Economists studying financial media have found that personal blame narratives consistently generate more engagement than structural analysis pieces do. That engagement gap means personal blame narratives get repeated, shared, and passed down far more reliably than the boring, accurate structural version. So the lecture is not just emotionally satisfying to deliver, it is also, unfortunately, the version of the story that is naturally built to spread. Consider also the role of survivorship bias, a concept that explains an enormous amount of confusing generational financial advice you have ever received. The people delivering these lectures are, by definition, the ones who succeeded financially within their specific economic conditions and era. The people who struggled under those exact same conditions are much less likely to be sitting at the head of the table delivering confident advice. So you are systematically only hearing from the winners of each generation's specific economic lottery, which badly skews the advice you actually receive. It is a little like only interviewing lottery winners about their investment strategy and concluding that buying lottery tickets is a reliable retirement plan. The losers of that same lottery rarely get invited to give a speech about their choices, even though their experience is statistically far more common. Consider one final layer, the way governments and institutions have historically benefited from this exact same individual blame narrative. If economic struggle is framed as a personal failing, there's much less political pressure to actually address the structural causes behind it. Wage stagnation, housing shortages, and healthcare costs are policy choices, and policy choices can theoretically be reversed by different ones. Personal laziness, on the other hand, requires no policy response whatsoever, just a stern lecture and perhaps a self-help book with a title in bold font. That convenience is exactly why this framing has survived across so many different governments, decades, and economic systems throughout modern history. So, what does the honest version of this conversation actually sound like once you strip away generations of recycled, disappointed sighing? Every generation has managed money reasonably well, given the specific tools, wages, and costs available to them at that exact moment in history. Every generation has included careless spenders and disciplined savers, because humans do not change that dramatically in 20 years. What actually changes, decade after decade, is the ratio between wages and essential costs, which is a far less catchy but far more honest explanation. The Wealth Records has tracked this ratio across housing, healthcare, education, and childcare, and the trend line only moves in one direction. It gets harder, not easier, for each successive generation to convert a normal paycheck into a stable, secure, and eventually comfortable adult life. That is not a mystery requiring a lecture about personal responsibility. That is simply an economy quietly redistributing risk downward over time. Think about how differently these dinner table conversations would go if everyone simply had to cite a source before delivering a generational insult. Instead of just work harder, imagine being required to say work harder, according to which specific wage data from which specific decade exactly. That single requirement alone would probably end 90% of these lectures before dessert even had a chance to arrive at the table. So the next time someone tells an entire generation they are bad with money, ask them one simple, extremely satisfying follow-up question. Ask them exactly what their starter home cost relative to their entry-level salary, and then sit back and enjoy the sudden change in subject. Watch how quickly the lecture about discipline turns into a lecture about how things were simply different back then, which is, of course, the entire point. Things were different back then. That is not an excuse. That is literally the whole explanation everyone keeps somehow forgetting to mention. History does not repeat exactly, but a good lazy insult apparently gets passed down through generations far more reliably than actual family wealth does. If you have ever been told you're bad with money by someone who bought a house for the price of a modern used car, you already know this pattern. Hit subscribe, because the Wealth Records is going to keep exposing the lectures nobody in your family wants fact-checked at the dinner table.